Hello everyone, today is Friday, March 10th, 2017, around 8 a.m. and I'm definitely going with YouTube for capturing my thoughts this morning because it is snowing. Yes, indeed. So I always like to capture the texture. This is a type of texture that would definitely escape my podcasting. So if you only follow me on YouTube, definitely check out the Python Experience podcast in iTunes and the other podcasting platforms, usually just by going there and searching on Python. And topics for this morning, so on almost a daily basis, I feel almost kind of like the inertial resistance, the difficulty in taking this next step of going from general Python to Pandas data manipulation with equal comfort and ease as I had in the SQL world for the past 20 years or so. So I got started with SQL, as many people do, by a Microsoft SQL Server installation from many years ago that was used for Scopus, a customer support application, which has since been rolled up into, I don't know even who has it now. It's probably Epicor, but it's, miniature ERP or CRM stuff, enterprise resource planning, customer relationship management, which is so much less of a category of software than it used to be because everything can be cobbled together now from components to provide a more custom solution. But at any rate, Scopus was one of those customer support solutions from back in the day, written in a language called TCL, sometimes called Tickle, which was one of the great scripting languages that I cut my teeth on when I was trying to decide what to do for web development. Of course, in those days, I say of course like everyone knows it, but back in those days, the other major scripting language that was used on the web extensively was Perl. And Perl is still around today, struggling to remain one of the relevant scripting languages of tech, facing a lot of competition now with Python, which has been around not quite as long, but has continuously had momentum building and additional traction, whereas Perl, not so much. But at any rate, I digress. I wrote TCL scripts to interact with SQL in a couple of different environments, both at a company called Scala Multimedia, or Scala Digital Signage, or these days just Scala Signage, I guess. Not to be confused with the Scala programming language that runs on the Java runtime engine, but both at Scala and another company called Profit 21, which got rolled up into Activant, which I think got rolled up into Epicor. And so I used a lot of SQL, first in TCL, and then I switched over to VBScript, or Visual Basic Scripting Edition, with something from Microsoft called ADO, or the Active Data Object, and really got good and familiar with SQL. I could do some remarkable things. I very frequently used the Microsoft tools for directly accessing the SQL Server. They called it Query Analyzer back in the day. It probably has a new name today. But for a more generic access to just SQL these days, there's a bunch of clients out in the public domain, or the free and open source world. Workbench J, I think they call it. It's a Java client, so it's nice and cross-platform. And that's what I use to connect to Amazon Redshift, which is basically Postgres. So Postgres is similar to the SQL Server world, but at any rate, I still dabble in SQL. It's an easy language. It's a lot like the web in that, I think they call it imperative. The language is everything agnostic, except for the vendor-specific dialects in it, but for the most part, like HTML, SQL is generic and does not prescribe how a thing gets done. It just gives sort of a recipe, and the execution plan is up to the browser in the case of HTML and the database in the case of SQL. So the transition that's so hard to make right now is from SQL being sort of hardwired into my head to a much more generic and abstract data manipulation environment that exists in Pandas, which is one of the free and open source libraries for Python that lets you do all this SQL-like stuff. But for every SQL statement, there's an equivalent Pandas way of doing it, which is nice, but different. And so getting it into my fingers, getting it into my head, getting it into my muscle memory so that I can manipulate data generically in the Python world without necessarily having a database there is this difficult transition I'm trying to make. But it is essential because for a powerful tech this day and age, one of the first things you want to do is decouple yourself from specific platform technology implementations, aside from those that work as the great Rosetta Stone translators of the world between tech platforms, which of course is Python, and to a lesser degree Linux and the Linux set of commands, because it's on so many platforms as sort of your underpinnings to put Python on top of, and to an even lesser degree Git, so that all your code can move around rather seamlessly between these diverse different hardware platforms. There's plenty of other solutions to that, but as soon as you go past Git to things like Ansible or Celery, you're on a particular deployment platform on Python or some other intermediary layer. So it's better to live at this commonality that cuts across the whole tech industry. But why Pandas then? Because that isn't that commonality. That's that next step up, as if it were a Python deployment system like Ansible or Celery. Isn't there something lower down for data? And yes, it is. It's just the standard data object model in Python of dictionaries, which are hash tables, and lists and tuples. So do things with the standard data models in Python, and then be able to take that next step over to the Pandas world, so you have the power of SQL-like stuff generically, and you're not tied to a particular technology platform vendor implementation. That's the transition I'm trying to make. So stick with me as I muscle my way through that and give you the most valuable findings of that experience. Thanks for joining me. Hope to talk to you again soon. And don't forget to subscribe.